There are two kinds of hay in this world, and most farmers never learn the difference until it's too late. One kind feeds animals, the other builds fortunes. In the summer of 1996 in Harper County, Kansas, a 61-year-old farmer named Daniel Mercer sold hay for $3 a bale. That same hay would be worth $14 to the right buyer. The difference wasn't the field, it wasn't the weather. It was something no one in his county even knew how to see. Daniel Mercer had been farming since 1958. 40 years of cutting, drying, and baling alfalfa on 180 acres of flat Kansas ground. Not a big operation, not a flashy one, just steady. Paid off equipment, no debt. And one rule his father told him before he died: don't make hay, cure it. Most men in Harper County made hay. They cut when the field looked ready. They baled when the sun allowed. They stacked it wherever they had space, and they sold it by the ton. Commodity. No questions asked, no quality inspected. Weight, price, done. Daniel didn't do that. He cut earlier, waited longer, touched every step like it mattered, because to him, it did. His neighbors thought he was slow, thought he was wasting time, thought he was giving up yield for no reason. Why cut early, they'd say. You're losing tons. Daniel would just nod. He wasn't losing anything. He was changing what he was selling. In July of 1996, a cattle buyer named Roy Ellison pulled into Daniel's farm. Roy bought hay the way most buyers did, by volume, by weight. He walked into the barn, grabbed a bale, cut the twine, and opened it. The hay was green, soft, clean, leaves still attached, smelled like fresh summer air. Roy didn't care. He tossed it back onto the stack. How many bales? About 1,800. I'll take the lot. $3 a bale. Daniel looked at him for a long moment. $3. That was the going rate. Fair price. Easy money. Most farmers would have shaken his hand. Daniel didn't. This isn't cattle hay. Roy smirked. Hay is hay. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, it just looks that way. Roy laughed. Son, I've been buying hay for 25 years. I don't need a lecture. $3. Take it or leave it. Daniel walked over, picked up the same bale Roy had opened, and pulled a flake apart. Leaves held together. No dust. No mold. No coarse stems. You see hay. I see feed. Roy shrugged. Still hay. Daniel set the bale down. Then you're not my buyer. Roy stared at him like he'd lost his mind. You're turning down a full load? Daniel nodded. Yes. Roy shook his head, laughed under his breath, and walked back to his truck. Suit yourself. Hope you find someone who pays more than market. He drove off in a cloud of dust, and just like that, Daniel was sitting on 1,800 bales of hay with no buyer. That night, his wife asked him the question everyone else was thinking. What if you're wrong? What if hay is just hay? Daniel didn't answer right away. He walked out to the barn, pulled open a bale, breathed it in. Sweet, clean, alive. Then he said quietly, if it was just hay, it wouldn't smell like this. 2 months later, someone would drive down a county road by accident, step into that barn, and turn those same bales into something worth 4 times more. But that only happened because Daniel Mercer understood something no one else in his county did: the difference between making hay and curing it. Let me show you what Daniel Mercer was actually doing. Because to Roy Ellison, it was just hay. But to Daniel, every bale was the result of a process most farmers never had the patience to follow. It started with the cut. Most farmers in Harper County cut alfalfa when the field was in full bloom. More flowers, more weight, more yield, more money if you were selling by the ton. Daniel cut earlier, late bud stage, before the flowers opened. At that moment, the plant held the highest protein, the softest stems, and the most leaves. But it came with a cost: 15% less yield, less hay in the barn, less money, if you didn't know what you were doing. Daniel accepted that loss every single year because he wasn't selling weight. He was selling quality. After the cut came the conditioning. He ran a 1976 Heston mower conditioner. Old machine, slow, but it did one thing right. It cracked the stems without destroying the leaves. That mattered more than speed, because alfalfa doesn't dry evenly. Leaves dry fast, stems dry slow. If the stems stay wet too long, the leaves become brittle and fall off during handling. And when the leaves fall off, you're left with stems. And stems don't sell. Then came the TED. Most farmers skipped it. Some did it once. Daniel did it twice. First pass, 4 hours after cutting. Second pass, the next morning. Each time he lifted the hay, spread it, and let air move through it evenly. No clumps, no wet pockets, just uniform drying across the field. It cost him time, but it bought him consistency. After that, the rake. Not a fast rotary rake like everyone else used. A side delivery rake. Slower, gentler. It rolled the hay instead of tearing it, and again, it protected the leaves, because every leaf still attached was money still in the bale. Then came the most dangerous part: the weight. After raking, Daniel didn't bale immediately. He waited for the window. 13 to 15% moisture. Not guesswork. Measured. Checked with a probe. Again and again. Because that window only lasted a few hours. Too wet, and the hay would mold in storage. Too dry, and the leaves would shatter into dust. And once that happened, the value was gone. Daniel never missed that window. 40 years in the field had taught him something no tool could measure. He could feel it in the stem, in the air, in the way the windrow settled under his boots. Then came the baling. A 1978 Heston square baler. Old. Paid off. Set lighter than most farmers would accept. 45-pound bales. firm but not tight, because overcompression crushed the hay from the inside, broke stems, shattered leaves, created dust, and dust meant rejection. Finally, the stack. Daniel didn't leave bales in the field overnight. Not once. Every bale was in the barn before dark, because night air carries moisture, dew settles, and even dry hay can absorb enough surface moisture to start mold. The barn wasn't convenience, it was protection, airflow, shade, control. And then the cure. 2 weeks, stacked, breathing, equalizing moisture across every bale, the color deepening, the smell strengthening, sweet, clean, alive. That smell, that was the difference. That was what Roy Ellison couldn't see, and what Daniel Mercer was betting everything on. Because somewhere there were buyers who didn't measure hay by weight. They measured it by what it did. And when one of those buyers finally found Daniel's barn, the price of his hay was going to change overnight. 2 months after Roy Ellison drove away, Daniel Mercer still hadn't sold a single bale. 1,800 bales, stacked 6 high in the barn, perfectly cured, completely unsold. His neighbors started talking, at the co-op, at the feed store. Daniel's sitting on hay again, thinks it's worth more than market. He'll learn. They'd seen this before. Farmers who tried to outsmart the market. Farmers who thought their product was special. Most of them ended up discounting by winter, just to clear space. Even his wife started to worry. "Maybe you should sell half," she said one evening, "just to be safe." Daniel shook his head. "If I sell it like cattle hay, then that's all it ever was." October came, then November. The first frost settled over Harper County. Most farmers had already moved on. Fields cleared, money in the bank. Daniel still had hay, and nothing else. Then one afternoon, a truck he'd never seen before turned off the county road. Dark green pickup, out-of-state plates. It rolled slowly up to the barn and stopped. The driver stepped out, mid-40s, clean boots, not a local. He didn't ask about price, didn't ask about quantity. He just stood there, breathing. "That alfalfa?" he asked. Daniel nodded. "Yes, sir." The man walked into the barn, pulled a bale from the stack, cut the twine, opened it, and then he did something Roy Ellison never did. He lifted a flake and smelled it. He didn't speak right away, just stood there, holding that flake in his hand. Then he shook it gently. No dust, no leaf loss. The flakes separated clean, soft, flexible, alive. "Where'd you learn to cure like this?" Daniel looked at him. "My father." The man nodded slowly. "Not many left who know how." He set the flake back into the bale, carefully, like it mattered. "What are you asking?" Daniel didn't answer immediately, because for the first time, the question actually meant something. 14, he said. The man didn't react, didn't laugh, didn't negotiate. Delivered? Barn pickup. The man nodded again. I'll take 800. Just like that. No argument. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Not relief. Not yet. Something deeper. Validation. What are you feeding? Daniel asked. Performance horses, the man said. Lexington. Daniel had never been to Kentucky, but he knew what that meant. Those weren't cattle. Those weren't average animals. Those were investments. Animals worth more than his entire farm. And they didn't eat commodity. They ate quality. The man reached into his truck, pulled out a checkbook, and wrote a deposit on the spot. I'll send a trailer next week, he said. Keep the rest stacked. I'll be back for more. He got into his truck, started the engine, then stopped. One more thing, he said through the window. Don't ever sell this as cattle hay again. Then he drove off. Daniel stood there in the doorway of his barn, watching the dust settle on the road. 800 bales at $14. More than 4 times what Roy Ellison had offered. Same hay, same field, same summer, different buyer. That night, Daniel didn't say much at dinner. He just sat there quietly, thinking about something his father told him 40 years earlier. The market doesn't decide what your work is worth. You do. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Mercer realized he had been underpricing himself for decades. The first trailer arrived 3 days later. 53-foot van. Clean. Sealed. Nothing like the open wagons Daniel was used to. The driver stepped out, checked the barn, and said one thing. Load it careful. Not fast, not efficient. Careful. Because this wasn't commodity anymore. This was cargo. Daniel loaded every bale by hand, one at a time. Stacked tight, but not crushed. Aligned so airflow stayed clean. He moved slower than he ever had, and for the first time, slow felt right. 800 bales, loaded in just under 5 hours. The driver signed the ticket, closed the doors, and pulled away. Daniel stood there, watching something leave his farm that he finally understood the value of. A week later, the call came. Send the rest. No negotiation, no complaint, no adjustments. Just 2 words. Send it. That was the moment everything changed. Not the first sale, not the price. The repeat order. Because 1 buyer can be luck. 2 buyers can be timing. But a repeat buyer, that's proof. By December, Daniel's barn was empty. Every bale sold. Every stack gone. At $14, his neighbors noticed. They always did when money showed up. Where'd it go? Who bought it? Daniel didn't say much. Different market. That answer only made things worse, because farmers understand 2 things: what something costs and what it sells for. And when those 2 numbers don't match, people start asking questions. January came, then February. Winter settled in, and for the first time in years, Daniel wasn't worried about next season because he wasn't chasing yield anymore. He was building something else. In early March, the same truck came back. Same driver, same trailer. This time, he didn't even ask to see the hay. "You cutting again this year?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, sir." The driver leaned against the truck. "Boss wants all of it. First cutting, second cutting, everything." Daniel felt that shift again. Not hope, not luck. Control. Control. "Same price?" Daniel asked. The driver smiled slightly. "Depends. You keep it like last year, price goes up." That was the moment Daniel understood something most farmers never do. The market wasn't fixed. The price wasn't fixed. The only thing that was fixed was how most people chose to play the game. His neighbors were still selling hay by the ton, still chasing yield, still cutting late, still baling fast, still storing outside, still getting $3, maybe $4 a bale, and they thought that was normal. Daniel walked into his barn that evening, empty now, quiet. He could still smell it, that clean, sweet, finished hay. And he realized something that changed the way he would farm for the rest of his life. He wasn't competing with his neighbors anymore. He was operating in a different market entirely. Same land, same crop, same season, but a completely different game. And once you see that difference, you can't unsee it. The next summer, Daniel Mercer didn't change his process. He didn't scale, didn't rush, didn't try to double production. He just did the same thing, exactly the same way. Early cut, gentle conditioning, 2 passes with the Ted, slow rake, hit the moisture window, light density bales, stack before dark, 2 weeks to cure. Nothing new, nothing flashy, just discipline. His neighbors watched him, same as every year. Still cutting early, still losing yield, still doing it the hard way. They shook their heads, because from the outside, nothing had changed. But everything had. The first trailer came before the second cutting, not after, before. The buyer wasn't waiting anymore. He was planning. "Load first cutting," the driver said. "Same as last year. Price is $15. $15. Same hay his neighbors were selling for $4. Same fields. Same rain. Same sun. Different result. By the end of that season, Daniel had sold every bale again. First cutting, second cutting, even the lighter third cutting. All pre-sold, all accounted for. No guessing, no waiting, no discounting. His neighbors started to notice something else. Daniel wasn't worried anymore. Not about weather, not about price swings, not about buyers. Because he wasn't chasing the market. The market was coming to him. One evening, late August, a neighbor finally asked the question no one wanted to say out loud. "What are you doing different?" Daniel looked out across his field. Wind moving through the alfalfa. Same as always. Nothing different, he said. Just doing it right. The neighbor frowned, because that wasn't the answer he wanted. He wanted a shortcut, a trick, something he could copy in one season. But there wasn't one, because what Daniel was selling wasn't just hay. It was consistency. It was trust. It was 40 years of doing the same thing the right way when nobody was paying attention. That kind of value doesn't show up overnight. And it doesn't disappear overnight either. Years later, when Daniel finally slowed down, the buyer didn't leave. He stayed with the farm, with the process, with the standard. Because what he needed was never just hay. It was reliability. The barn still filled every summer, still smelled the same, sweet, clean, right. And every bale that left that place carried something most farmers never think about. Not just weight, not just feed, value. Because in the end, the difference was never the field. It was never the weather. It was never the equipment. It was how the work was done. There are two kinds of hay in this world. The kind you sell by the ton, and the kind you sell by the result. Daniel Mercer chose the second. And the market eventually caught up to him.